So, we've just seen how brains are these incredibly complex, cooperative systems. But here's the kicker. They're not neat, uniform networks like some well-engineered blueprint. Think more like a bustling city built by many different architects improvising at the same time. Lots of specialized districts, sub-networks, connected in all sorts of ways. Take vision, for instance. It's not one single pathway but a whole mishmash of specialized circuits working together. This messy, improvised architecture actually suggests a shift in perspective. Instead of hunting for one grand unified theory explaining everything, maybe we should focus on understanding these specific cognitive neighborhoods and how they talk to each other. This brings us to Marvin Minsky and Seymour Papert's fascinating idea, laid out in works like The Society of Mind. They basically said, let's model the mind not as one big computer, but as a society. Imagine a town full of little specialists, each with their own tiny job. These agents are super focused, operating within their own micro-worlds, tackling really small problems. Why small? Because if you try to make one agent handle everything, it gets overwhelmed. Think about building a tower with blocks. You wouldn't have one master block builder, you'd have agents for starting, adding blocks, deciding when to stop, and even smaller agents for finding and picking up blocks. The key is that complex tasks require organizing these specialized agents into larger teams or agencies. And the mind itself? It emerges from this whole bustling society interacting. Now, don't get confused. Minsky and Papert were talking about an abstract cognitive architecture, inspired by the brain, but not claiming actual neurons are these agents. They're more like functional roles. So, let's drill down into these agents and agencies. An agent is like that highly specialized worker. Think of the constructor agent I mentioned earlier, whose sole job is building block towers. But wait, the constructor can't do it alone. To build a tower, it needs help from subagents, one for starting, one for adding blocks, one for knowing when to finish. And those subagents? They need even smaller agents, maybe one to find a block and another to pick it up. See the hierarchy? What looks like one big constructor agency from afar is actually a team of interacting agents up close. And this isn't fixed. If you zoom out further, maybe the whole block building activity becomes just one agent within an even bigger playground agency. The point is, what counts as an agent versus an agency depends entirely on the level of detail you're looking at. It's all relative, like defining a country versus a continent. The whole society of mind idea hinges on this emergent property. The complex constructor behavior pops up because all those little agents are working together. Now, here's where things get philosophically spicy. Minsky's model is brilliant for analyzing cognition, breaking it down into these interacting parts. But he often talks about our everyday experiences, playing with blocks, being conscious, introspecting. He even sprinkles Buddhist quotes throughout his book. It's like he senses a connection between his scientific analysis and deep human experience. But then he kind of stops short. His science tells us there's no real central self running the show, just this society of agents. Yet, he argues we can't just ditch our belief in a personal me. We're stuck believing in something whose existence his own theory undermines. It's like saying, we know there's no captain of the ship, just sailors doing their jobs, but we still feel like we're sailing under a captain's command. This creates this weird split. Science says one thing, our lived experience screams another. Minsky ends up in what he calls a schizophrenic position, condemned by our very nature to believe in a self we know, according to our best science, doesn't exist. Interestingly, this tension isn't unique to cognitive science. Let's hop over to psychoanalysis, specifically the object relations theory branch developed by folks like Melanie Klein and Donald Fairbairn. This school shifted focus from just Freud's id, ego, superego to how we develop by internalizing relationships with important people, especially parents. Think about it. We carry around mental representations, or schemas, of these significant others. Fairbairn went so far as to say our basic motivation isn't just seeking pleasure, but forming these internalized relationships. Horowitz later pointed out that these internalized relationship patterns sound remarkably like Minsky's agents. It's fascinating how two seemingly different fields arrive at a similar idea. The mind isn't a simple unified structure, but a complex system built from interacting, often implicitly represented, parts. Both suggest we can understand the mind conceptually without needing to posit some solid, unchanging core self. But here's the rub with object relations therapy. While it's a powerful analytical tool, it's also a therapeutic practice. Patients learn to explore their feelings and behaviors by seeing them as reactions triggered by these internalized relationship figures. The goal, however, is usually framed around making the patient better functioning, improving their relationships, feeling more comfortable. Rarely does the therapy explicitly push the patient to question the very existence of the self they are so diligently analyzing. In many places, psychoanalysis is heavily influenced by psychiatry, seen more as a medical intervention than a deep dive into the nature of mind itself. So, while it uncovers the lack of a unitary self through analysis, it doesn't seem to fully grapple with the contradiction, the scientific insight versus our persistent clinging to the idea of a self. It doesn't quite bridge that gap Minsky identified. Some might argue that perhaps Lacanian psychoanalysis, with its more radical take, comes closer to confronting this issue. But that's a whole other discussion. Okay, let's switch gears completely and look at Buddhism. How does Buddhism tackle this puzzle? If there's no permanent self, why does life seem so coherent? Why do we keep acting like there is one? The Buddha's breakthrough insight, often called dependent co-arising or pratityasamutpada, offers a profound answer. It's the idea that nothing exists independently, everything arises in dependence upon causes and conditions. Think of it like a chain reaction or a complex web. Every moment of experience, every thought, feeling, sensation, arises because of previous conditions, and in turn sets up the next set of conditions. It's a continuous cyclical process. This isn't just about metaphysics, it's about understanding the mechanics of psychological causality, how habits form, how conditioning works, and how we get trapped in cycles of suffering. The emphasis here is practical. Understanding this causal chain helps us see how we get caught in it, and ultimately how to break free. The classic way to visualize this is the 12 links of dependent origination, sometimes depicted as the wheel of life. Look at this diagram. It shows a cycle representing the entire process of conditioned existence. Each link represents a stage, and crucially, each one conditions the next one, and is conditioned by the previous ones. It's a closed loop. This isn't just about one lifetime. It can describe the flow of moments within a single breath, or span across countless lifetimes in Buddhist cosmology. What's fascinating is its fractal nature. The same basic pattern repeats whether you zoom in or out. It's like a coastline. The overall shape looks similar whether you look at the whole country or just a small bay. This cycle captures the essence of how our experience unfolds moment by moment, driven by causes and conditions. Let's quickly walk through these 12 links. 1. Ignorance. This is the starting point, not knowing the true nature of things, specifically, the absence of a permanent self. It includes the confusion that arises from believing in a self. 2. Volitional action samskara. Driven by ignorance, we act as if there's a self doing things. This intention leaves karmic imprints. 3. Consciousness vijnana. Awareness arises, conditioned by past actions. 4. Name and form namarupa. The psychophysical package mind and body that consciousness inhabits. 5. 6. Sense basis sadhyatana. Our 5 senses plus the mind sense ready to interact with their objects. 6. Contact sparsha, the actual meeting of sense and object. Without contact, no experience. 7. Feeling vedana, the raw quality of the experience, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. This is what hits us directly. 8. Craving tersna, the automatic reaction arises desire for what feels good, aversion to what feels bad. 9. Grasping upadana, we cling to these desires and aversions. 10. Becoming bhava, this grasping sets the stage for creating future conditions. 11. Birth yati, a new situation or existence arises. We become aware of the cycle. 12. Decay and death jarmaranga, everything conditioned decays and dies. This includes the suffering of aging and death, which fuels the next cycle. Notice how each step logically follows from the last, creating a seemingly unstoppable loop. So, we're stuck in this cycle, right? But wait! There's a potential breakpoint. Look at link number 8, craving. This is where the rubber meets the road. Up until this point, the chain seems to run automatically, driven by past conditioning. But when craving arises, pleasantness or aversion, there's a window. Traditionally, mindfulness practices aim to cultivate a state of alert and aware presence. In this state, one can recognize the craving arising and choose not to automatically follow it into grasping and the subsequent links. It's like hitting the pause button on an automatic response. By interrupting this habitual pattern, one gains a moment of clarity, a glimpse beyond the conditioned reaction. This interruption, this mindful awareness, is presented as the key technique for disrupting the cycle and beginning to see the flow of phenomena more clearly. It's the foundation for liberation. Okay, so we've seen the cycle of dependent origination. But how does this explain the apparent continuity of our lives, the feeling of a consistent self? If there's no solid me, how does the me seem so real? The answer lies in emergence again. Remember how the constructor agency emerged from interacting agents? Similarly, the recurring patterns of our thoughts, feelings, and actions, the self we experience, emerge from the continuous coordinated operation of these 12 links. There's no little self-puppeteer pulling the strings. The self-like experience is the pattern itself, the emergent property of the whole system working together. Intention, that volitional action from link 2, is particularly important here. It leaves karmic traces, shaping future experiences and reinforcing tendencies. These accumulated tendencies, this karma, create the illusion of a continuous stable self. It's like the tracks left in the snow by a passing animal. They look like a continuous path, but there's no solid entity following it. Now, let's zoom in even further, beyond the aggregates and the 12 links. The Abhidharma tradition, particularly in texts like Vasubandhu's Abhidharma Kosha, developed a technique called basic factor analysis. Think of it like taking apart an experience into its most fundamental components. The term dharma here means a basic element or phenomenon, something that appears in experience. The idea is to break down complex experiences like seeing a red apple into their irreducible parts, the ultimate realities. This is similar to Western philosophical traditions, like Leibniz or Russell, trying to find the fundamental building blocks of reality. However, there's a crucial difference. Abhidharma scholars weren't necessarily claiming these basic elements were substantial things existing independently. They were more like descriptive units of analysis, useful for understanding the structure of experience, especially for practical purposes like liberation. Within this framework, certain factors are considered omnipresent. They show up in every single moment of consciousness. Think of them as the essential ingredients mixed into every mental state. Geshe Rapton uses a nice analogy. Consciousness itself is like the hand, and these factors are like the fingers, palm, etc. They constitute the hand. 1. Contact, the meeting of sense and object. 2. Feeling, the raw pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral tone. 3. Discernment, recognizing what's perceived and, importantly, recognizing the underlying impulses or intentions, passion, aggression, ignorance. 4. Intention, the volitional aspect, the drive behind actions. This is key for karmic continuity. 5. Attention, focusing consciousness onto something specific. It's the dynamic interplay of these 5 factors, along with others, that gives each moment of experience its unique character. And again, this resulting experience is seen as an emergent property of these interacting factors. Let's focus on 2 of these factors, intention and attention, because they seem particularly relevant for change. Intention, sadhana, is huge. It's what drives our mental activities, moment by moment. It's the manifestation of that underlying volitional tendency we saw earlier. Because it leaves karmic traces, it's central to how habits get formed and reinforced. Usually, we're unconscious of our intentions, we just react. But mindfulness practices encourage slowing down, becoming aware of the intention behind even tiny actions, like shifting posture when uncomfortable. Recognizing intention, especially after a craving arises, is a direct way to potentially break the conditioned chain. Attention manaskara works closely with intention. Intention points consciousness in a general direction, and attention focuses it on specifics. When combined with awareness, attention becomes the basis for memory, mindfulness, and clear comprehension. Developing attention allows us to focus on what's actually happening in our minds, the sensations, the intentions, rather than getting lost in automatic reactions. It's like tuning a radio dial to catch the signal instead of static. So, we have this incredibly detailed, pragmatic analysis from Abhidharma, breaking down experience into factors to understand how conditioning works and how to potentially break free. On the other side, we have modern neuroscience, which increasingly recognizes the brain's plasticity, the fact that our perceptions and experiences aren't fixed but can be reshaped. There's a potential resonance here. Both fields seem to acknowledge that experience isn't a smooth, continuous stream but a dynamic, discontinuous process. Neuroscience has made huge strides, but often it treats subjective experience as something external to be measured, not something to be directly analyzed and transformed. The challenge highlighted here is precisely that. How do we connect the scientific discovery of a mind without a solid self with the lived reality of experiencing a self? How do we bridge that gap? Here's the danger zone. When this discovery of no self comes purely from a scientific or theoretical standpoint, detached from direct experience, it can easily lead to nihilism. Nietzsche defined radical nihilism as the conviction that existence is unsustainable when we appeal to our highest values. Think about Jackendorf. On one hand, his analysis suggests consciousness might be epiphenomenal, serving no causal purpose. But then he admits, consciousness is too important in our lives to consider it useless. Or Minsky, arguing free will is a myth from a scientific perspective, yet concluding we can't abandon the belief in it because it's essential for our psychology. See the split? Science delivers a verdict, but our lived experience, our deepest intuitions, refuse to accept it. We end up in this impossible position, knowing something isn't true, yet feeling compelled to believe it anyway. It's a profound inner conflict. This is where traditions emphasizing direct examination of experience, like mindfulness or open awareness practices, offer a different path. The core idea is that by looking closely at our own experience, we directly perceive the lack of a solid, independent self. And crucially, this isn't experienced as a loss or a void. Instead, it's often described as a sense of liberation, freedom from rigid beliefs, from the compulsive grasping that reinforces the illusion of self. Through practices like mindfulness, we develop a clearer, more open awareness. This allows us to see the conditioned patterns, the intentions, the cravings, the aversions, as they arise, rather than being swept away by them. This clarity enables conscious choice, breaking the automatic cycle. True freedom in this view isn't about having a powerful will that controls everything, but acting in ways that are open, responsive, and not driven by egocentric desires. This offers a potential way out of the nihilistic dilemma, a way to integrate the scientific insights with the lived reality of experience. So we've journeyed through the landscape of the mind, questioning the solidity of the self. But now, having dismantled the self, we face a new question. What about the world? For so long we took the world as the staple dropped against which our self acted. But if the self is an illusion, what about the world? Does it dissolve too? Or does it become even more real, or perhaps more problematic? Are we now trapped in solipsism, unable to find anything outside our own subjective experience? Perhaps our attachment to a fixed, objective world is just as deep-seated as our attachment to a fixed self. This leads us to the next critical step, examining the very nature of reality itself, but this time freed from the constraints of assuming a permanent observer. That's where our exploration takes us next.